These payoffs can also emerge as average payoffs in an infinitely repeated game. Both players will receive an average payoff of 5 if neither player ever cooperates in the infinitely repeated game, and both players get a payoff of 10 on average if they always cooperate with one another. If player 2 never cooperates in the infinitely repeated game, but player 1 cooperates half the time and doesn't cooperate half the time, then player 2 will get an average payoff of 10, because half the time he'll get a payoff of 15, and half the time he'll get a payoff of 5. Player 1, on the other hand, will only get a payoff on average of 2.5, because half the time he gets a payoff of 0, and half the time he gets a payoff of 5. If player 1 never cooperates in the infinitely repeated game, and player 2 cooperates half the time and doesn't cooperate half the time, then player 1 will get an average payoff of 10, because half the time he gets the payoff of 15, and half the time he gets a payoff of 5. Player 2 will get an average payoff of 2.5, because half the time he gets a payoff of 0, and half the time he gets a payoff of 5. If the two players alternate between both cooperating and both not cooperating, they'll both get an average payoff of 7.5, because half the time they'll get a payoff of 10, and half the time they get a payoff of 5. If player 2 never cooperates and player 1 always cooperates, then player 2 will have an average payoff of 15, whereas player 1 will have an average payoff of 0. And similarly, if player 1 never cooperates and player 2 always cooperates, then player 1 will get an average payoff of 15, whereas player 2 will get an average payoff of 0. You should then be able to see that by constructing different sequences of cooperation and non-cooperation along the infinitely repeated game, we can construct any average payoff pair that lies within the shaded green region in panel C. The fact that we can construct such different average payoff pairs, depending on how we construct the sequences of cooperation and non-cooperation, doesn't of course mean that such average payoff pairs can emerge in a subgame perfect equilibrium. We'll take up that question in graph 24.13.